Hello and welcome, my name is Charlie Roscoe, and I've only just recently reached level 30 in Gran Turismo Sport, which means two things. One, I'm now an Emerald driver, and two, I can participate in the 2 offline endurance races. Great, some of you might say. Well, yes, but the only problem is the AI, well, they're not known to be very good. So the question now is, how do we make these races challenging? Now, before I get any further into it, I want to jump in before you all start furiously typing the obvious comment down below. No, we should not have to invent our own ways to make game modes fun, and we definitely shouldn't have to deliberately handicap ourselves to make the racing competitive. You can understand when the top 0.5% of players in any given game decide to create ways of challenging themselves. I mean, you can't expect developers to ensure a challenge for every single person that plays the game, especially the sweatiest elites. It's fair enough that they have to find new ways to test themselves, and it's often pretty fun for us to watch. But it should not be a thing that such a large percentage of the player base has to do. I know Gran Turismo games have always traditionally had slow AI. You always start last or near the back and have to work your way to the front before the race finishes. But just because that's the way it's always been, doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. And at least in my opinion, in 2018 it's not the right way to do it. They already tried something different with Gran Turismo Sport, why not keep the changes rolling in? How about giving us an AI difficulty slider bar, or at least 5 or 6 set difficulties so people can make it as hard or easy as they like. Then throw in a qualifying session before the race and the whole game starts to take another step towards dropping the Cade off the end of Simcade. But I'll leave my wishlist suggestions for a future video I'm working on. Moving on to how we might go about making these endurance races fun despite the lackluster AI. Well, I say lackluster AI, but what you're watching is legitimately the first time I've done one of these enduros, so I'm definitely making the assumption that they'll be slow. Just how slow remains to be seen. Anyway, I went through the pool of cars that I had in the Group 1 category, none of which by the way I've purchased, these are simply cars I've won. I made my decision based purely on which car has the least horsepower, so I chose the Mazda Why Is This Not the Furai and set about not giving a shit about the setup. In fact, the setup on the car is completely untouched from when I loaded into the race. I didn't even give it a fully customizable gearbox. I turned the power ratio percentage to the lowest setting, and the same for the weight reduction ratio. And even though I could have used racing soft or even super soft tyres, I put them on the hardest compound the game would allow, racing hards. I also did absolutely no practice in this car at all, so I had to learn and build up lap times as I raced. My starting position was 16th, and I ran fuel on the richest setting for the entirety of the race. Just to be clear, the intention was always to race as hard as I could during the race itself, because I'm trying to make it challenging and fun. Now, with the lack of practice, it took me until lap 3 just to overtake my first competitor. I also hadn't managed to get the fastest lap of the race, and I did start to wonder if I'd perhaps overdone it a touch with the handicaps. But by the end of lap 4, I'd gone fastest. Then again on lap 6, and again on lap 7, overtake a bloke, faster still on lap 10, and I was starting to feel a bit better about things. Time for my first pit stop, more hard tyres back on, and top the tanks. After this I was back in 12th place and over a third of the way through the race, and I have to admit I found myself again wondering if I was going to be able to win this. And that was a nice thing to feel. I had expected it would be a lot easier than this and the AI would be a lot slower. But they weren't, and this was good. I kept siphoning through the field and improving my lap times until, with about 25 minutes to go, I'd caught the top bunch, rounded the 3 of them up in a single lap and set about creating a 7-second gap before I had to pit again. This was not good, and at this point I suspected the fun was over, but I was willing to keep the dream alive and get through my final pits, see where the race takes us. This time I rejoined in 6th and again put my head down, hoping this would be an epic last lap scramble to take the win. But I quickly found myself in 2nd place, just 7 seconds behind the leader, and in a desperate last-ditch attempt to hinder myself, I switched to the in-car view, a view I'd never used and one that had very limited visibility, even after I'd adjusted the cockpit view to help. Clipping the apex, especially on the right-hand side, was tough, and it definitely slowed me up for a few laps while I got used to it. But alas, with 10 minutes still remaining, I found myself back in the lead. The only interesting thing to happen from there was when some Swedish upstart stole my fastest lap, which of course I had to reclaim. By the end of the race, I was disappointingly over 25 seconds in the lead, and remember, this was with the car's power and weight reduction percentages on the lowest settings, running the hardest compound tyres and changing them in every pit stop so as not to gain an advantage from them. No setup on the car, and all in a car that, to the best of my knowledge, is not regarded as one of the strongest cars in the class. So in summary, can you handicap yourself enough to get a good challenge from the endurance races? Well, there's a few varying factors here. It depends on your own pace. If you're 2 seconds per lap slower than me here, then yes, you probably can manipulate the race into a position where it's challenging. But sadly, if you're a similar pace to myself or quicker still, then if you can get through it once, I doubt you'll be going back for another run. I know I won't be. Hopefully you've been able to get something useful from this video, and if you think I've earned it, then please leave a like. If you're new to my channel, feel free to have a look at the other videos and make sure you subscribe for more. I think I'll live stream the Porsche Endurance race at some stage over the next week or so and see how that one goes. Thank you very much for joining me. Bye for now.